there, I'm Kat.
And I'm Derek. Welcome to Chit Chat with Derek and Kat.
We're your backstage pass into the world of family businesses, the real stories, the real challenges, and everything that makes these businesses thrive across generations.
Each week, we'll interview entrepreneurs, leaders, service providers, and family dynasties to swap stories, dig into lessons learned, and have a few laughs along the way.
So whether you're part of a family business, dreaming of starting one, or you just love a good success story, you're in the right place.
Let's go to it. It's time for Chit Chat with Derek and Kat. Welcome back to Chit Chat with Derek and Kat. Kat is the executive director of the Institute for Family-Owned Business, and I am Derek Volk. I own a corrugated box plant in Biddeford, Maine. I am a third-generation family-owned business myself, so we decided to start a podcast to talk and help spread the word about family businesses, and that's what we're doing today. So welcome to the show, Stacy Stitham. She is an attorney, and she is with Brann Isaacson. Welcome to the show, Stacy.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So tell us about your relationship with the Institute for Family-Owned Business.
Sure. So I am managing partner of Brann Isaacson. And Brann Isaacson, I know, has been a member of IFOB for a number of years, although don't quote me on how many years that exactly
No
is.
worries.
But some number of years. And Brann Isaacson's particular connection with the Institute is that in the past, we've been sort of structured as a family-owned business. We had various wicked smart Isaacson attorneys of multi-generations as part of our partnership structure and management. Unfortunately, our last Isaacson passed away a few years ago. However, we still represent a number of family-owned businesses and have kept up our connection with the Institute in that way.
That's terrific.
And Stacy, you have a family business tradition, don't you?
I do.
A little bit about that.
Sure. So I like to say I grew up in a family-owned law firm. I am a fifth generation attorney, so I've got Derek beat by 2 generations.
Wow.
And growing up, my father practiced with his father-in-law, my maternal grandfather, who had practiced with his father, who had practiced with his own father. So all the way back to 1889. And so as a child, I still remember kind of very fondly going in with my father to play attorney. I would take yellow legal pads and I would get stamps and highlighters, raid the secretary's desks and kind of make my own legal briefs. And when I was a little bit older, I actually had my first part-time job at the firm. I was their cleaning lady and shredded paper and did all the kind of really fun stuff that no one else wanted to do. So I cleaned toilets for a law firm before I ever became a lawyer.
Wow.
As I like to say.
Did you ever consider anything else, or did you know from the time you were pretty young that that's the path you wanted to go?
That's a great question. I did occasionally consider other things, some of which were more realistic than others. I think when I was 5, I wanted to be a musician, but I had no musical talent. And over the years, I thought about teaching, some sort of science related, something engineering or something like that. But I kept coming back to the practice of law. I think my family thought it was a somewhat unoriginal choice, but they saw why I was drawn to it, and I've certainly never regretted going into the legal profession.
That's terrific. My daughter's an attorney. She's a public defender in Pennsylvania.
Oh, wonderful.
And
Very important.
it was her 5th grade teacher that told us that Mariah should be an attorney. And we were like, we never even thought about that. We have no lawyers in our family. And we threw that out to her and kind of stuck. And she went back and forth over the years, but she ended up sticking with it, going to Temple Law. And now she's a public defender down in Pennsylvania, loves it.
I feel like normally when a teacher flags that for you, it's usually a way of saying that your child likes to argue a lot.
Yes.
Is that the case here?
That was probably the case, and she's very good at it. So I think it was a good fit for her.
Oh, that's great.
What is your specialty? What would you say is something that you're passionate about when it comes to law?
Sure. So great question. So Brann Isaacson represents a number of municipalities, schools, and businesses. all around the state. We do employment law, state and local taxes, corporate real estate, privacy, which is increasingly important these days, intellectual property, litigation, estate planning, you know it. For my part, I do a lot of work with intellectual property, trademarks, getting your logos trademarked, things like that. Checking privacy policies if you're collecting a lot of information from consumers, especially if you're selling online. We can collect a ton of information. Sometimes we don't even realize the volume of information we're collecting. And I occasionally do some litigation work. I would say out of those three areas, my passion is the IP, the intellectual property, the trademark stuff. I love kind of working with companies on their brand and their design, sort of tweaking it to make sure it's distinctive, and source identifying for them, letting them know of issues, hopefully before they run into them, of, oops, there's another company out there with something very similar to yours. And before you spend a lot of money on marketing materials, you might want to consider this. So I'd say that's the area law I practice in that I like the most, Derek.
So how is the world with ChatGPT and AI and things like that affecting your work?
A lot, actually. Yeah. So that's kind of the exciting thing about privacy law, or exciting or scary, depending on how you think of it. But certainly the more tools that are becoming available for interacting with customers, sometimes in ways we don't necessarily think of. It's designed to be very, hey, customer friendly, like a live chat on your website or something, having a chat bot that can answer questions for customers. We think that's a great customer solution that we're offering, a real benefit. But what can maybe be something that gives pause is the fact that in order for those chatbots to work, often we're sending them entire transcripts of customer conversations. And sometimes those transcripts can include information that might be a little more sensitive than we might guess, depending on what the customer says. That can certainly be the case if, for example, the customer is buying a medical device or something else, or mentions some sort of personal issue in their lives. So, just kind of working with companies to, basically do the kind of due diligence of what information are we collecting, what are we using it for, who we might be sharing it with, even inadvertently, and just doing a little kind of housekeeping on what do we really need, and how are we using that information. We're doing a lot of that these days with companies.
All right, so Stacy, because this is my show
and
Catherine's,
yes,
I'm gonna throw out a may or may not be hypothetical question to you.
Okay.
And get some free legal advice. Okay, so I own a corrugated box company in Biddeford called Volk Packaging, and we had a logo, and then in 1981, 82, we created a new logo. About 15 years ago, a company that may or may not have been located in Houston created almost the exact same logo, and it became their logo, same colors and everything. That company has since grown and is now nationwide and using our logo on all their marketing, all their trucks and everything. So if something like that were to hypothetically happen, what would we do about it? My logo is trademarked, by the way.
Your logo is trademarked?
Yes.
Your hypothetical logo.
Right. My hypothetical logo is trademarked, okay. Which I did when I saw their logo, because my thought was, oh my gosh, are these people going to knock on my door and tell me that I got to get rid of my logo, and I'm going to have to change all my trucks and all my paperwork and everything? Their logo is just a little angled a little differently, but other than that, I probably get a text maybe once every 2 to 3 weeks of somebody that sees their truck and says, hey, did you know this company stole your logo?
So let me ask a few hypothetical questions. So hypothetically, is the company in Texas basically in the same line of business that you are, Derek, or something pretty close to
Yeah,
it?
no, they're a corrugated box company.
Okay. And do you know if they hypothetically also have a trademark or not?
I assume that they do.
Okay.
Yeah, I would
Well,
assume that
so
they do.
so a couple of things come to mind, but it's certainly I am definitely not giving with a caveat. This is definitely not legal advice.
No, of course not.
No,
No,
it's
no, I would
not.
never even,
Come to mind.
I would never even
So
propose that you would give legal advice to me over a
right over the
podcast.
radio, yes.
No.
So I mean, the first thing to keep in mind is let's say even if you hadn't trademarked, or sorry, even if this hypothetical person hadn't trademarked, if you are the senior user, so you've been using your mark first,
Yeah.
and you're not significantly expanding your footprint. So, for example, you're pretty much kind of using it in the same markets you were always using it in and continuing to use it. Then a hypothetical junior user, even if they started getting bigger and bigger, couldn't come after you for kind of you just continuing the practice that you were already doing.
Okay.
So you'd have some protection even without a registered mark as a senior user.
Okay.
The fact that you have this hypothetical person has a registration, obviously gives you a lot more rights and a stronger position. And presumably you could challenge their usage, especially if, as seems to be the case, there are actual instances of confusion here. So
there's definitely confusion.
yeah, I mean, the standard for a trademark infringement is likelihood of confusion. And if there's actual examples of real confusion, not even a likelihood of confusion, that's pretty strong evidence. So certainly, and keep in mind, I haven't seen either of these.
No, I know. I'm just asking for the audience members. Should anybody in the audience ever face a situation such as this hypothetical, they would be able to know kind of what their rights are.
But certainly as a senior user with a registered trademark and examples of actual confusion from somebody else who's using it in a similar fashion, I'd say that was a pretty strong case. Keeping in mind, of course, that there's sort of what the law says and what the giant headache of going through litigation and spending a lot of money and figuring out if that's worth the trouble. There's a sort of practical question as well.
Right, which has always been my thought process, is it's not worth the effort.
I mean, sometimes you can sort of write what's known as a cease and desist letter. That might be hard if the company's been using it for 15 years and you haven't objected. I mean, there may be some issue there because you can get to a point where you've kind of sat on it sufficiently long that they argue that you've kind of waived the ability to go after them. You basically have given up your claim. So that might be an issue here, again, depending on the facts. But those are some thoughts that come to mind.
Interesting. Thank you.
So bring you back to family-owned businesses. So that might happen where somebody decides to create a logo or an image and they're small and they're just starting out. So they don't necessarily think that they have to think about these infringements or these other things. They may or may not have known that you had that logo, and they're in Texas. How do you help, or do you come across family businesses that you work with? Is it usually when they're in trouble that then they reach out to you, or is there proactive pieces of where you guys help with smaller or family-owned business? I mean, we have large and small family-owned businesses, so.
I would say both. Certainly, I tell people that when it comes to trademarks, this is one where like an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. It's when you're starting out, especially when you're test running a new brand, new logo, you want to kick the tires on it before you really heavily invest, because then it's much harder to do. You've built up goodwill with the new brand, et cetera, et cetera. We do have a lot of businesses that come to us, whether they're starting out, they're kind of entrepreneurs, they're launching their new business, and one of the things they want to look at is their brand name or their logo. We also get a lot of people who just come to us when they get in trouble. Sometimes and getting in trouble is relative. I mean, sometimes it's just they've tried to get a trademark on their own and there's been an issue in the process, they've gotten it rejected or whatever, and they want to do over with a lawyer to try to get it right. Or sometimes they've received that nasty cease and desist letter I just talked about that says, hey, you are using a mark very similar to ours. We were here first, cut it out. You have 15 days to disgorge all your profits or something like that. So we see them on both sides. We see the folks who are, really at the ground floor with maybe a new claim or sorry, a new brand or new logo. And we see the folks who are getting the claim and want to talk to us. We also represent businesses of varying sizes. So, a lot of our clients, they just have one or two, maybe it's their logo or their name or whatever it is. And we have other clients that, they are selling via catalog or online, and they have product, dozens of product names that they want to have cleared and make sure that they're not infringing. So really, it runs a lot in terms of sizes. It runs the full gamut.
So do you work with international companies too? Does it get different whether it's domestic or international?
So we represent domestic companies, but some of them have international portfolios. So if, maybe they sell in the European markets or things like that, there's a couple of things we can do there. There's sometimes we partner with other attorneys in other countries to help facilitate that. There's also, not to get too technical into the weeds if this isn't very interesting, but there's also a way where if you get a US trademark, you can use that as a springboard to get trademarks in other markets as well. So sometimes it's something we can handle. Sometimes we need some help from, your friendly Czechoslovakian attorney or something like that, or French attorney or whatever it might be, someone in the EU, or someone in Australia or China or whatever.
So trademarks are country specific?
They are, yep. And each country has slightly different rules about whether, the priority goes to the person who registers it first or the person who uses it first. I mentioned in the United States, you're the senior user, so you have certain rights. Other countries, if they beat you to the registration office, they might be the ones with the claim.
Even if they've never even used it.
Right. So there are some countries where, you see a lot of opportunistic behavior of, well, let me go register, Walmart or something like that, even though I know perfectly well I'm not the one using Walmart here. So yeah. So there are some different countries with different rules like that.
That was really, I remember when the internet first came out, that was a really big thing, is people were registering names. I remember my brother-in-law, ex-brother-in-law, was working for the tool company, one of the Japanese tool companies. I can't remember which one now. And somebody had registered their name and wanted like $100,000 for it. And they were furious because they were like, that's our name. Like, you can't take our name.
Yeah, so that was a huge issue in the start of the internet era. It was called cyber squatting, which is a great name, great image associated with that. And yeah, people would kind of buy up fairly visionary people who were like, aha, I know this is coming. I'm going to buy up Sears.com and then wait for Sears to figure out, oh crap, somebody else owns this, and then I'll sell it to them for the bargain price of 50 grand or whatever it was. And they also started buying up common misspellings, so Sears with a Z or something like that. So that has largely died out because there are certain rules now associated with registering domain names that can allow you to kind of file a cancellation proceeding if basically someone else has bought a well-established trademark with an intent to really just bad faith profit from it. So that kind of stuff that went on in the kind of wild west early days of the internet, not as common anymore, but you can still see some pretty opportunistic behavior with trademarks.
Yeah, well, a few years ago, so my son wrote a book, and it's called Bad Choices Make Good Stories, and he wanted badchoicesmakegoodstories.com. Well, turns out some lady in like North Carolina owned badchoicesmakegoodstories.com. So I got her contact info. I reached out to her, and she made me pay her $750 for it. And I was like, and I said to my son, I said, just go with .org. He's like, no, it has to be .com. It has to be .com. And so I spent the $750. She had never used it. It was a completely non-used website address, but she owned it. And so she made me pay for it. Years ago, I remember saying at one point, this was before apparently the rules were, well, maybe not, but I said, you know what I'm going to do? When American Idol narrows it down to the top 30, I'm going to register all their names.
Yeah.
And then one of them is going to become the American Idol, and I'm going to own their name. And I never actually
How'd that work out?
I never actually did that.
You didn't do it.
I never did it. But it was a crazy time when people were doing that.
Oh yeah, it's I mean, you know, whenever there's new technology, there are people who figure out ways to exploit new technology. So sometimes for better or worse. Yeah.
What is the most common thing that you find with family businesses? What is the biggest hurdle that family businesses face that maybe could have been avoided had they contacted an attorney sooner?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a great question. So I'd say probably not having to do with trademarks. But I think that, you know, the biggest thing that we get contacted as a firm about when it comes to family businesses is really sort of succession and transition planning. Obviously succession planning is a big deal in any company, transition planning, but there's often kind of an emotional component to succession planning in family-owned businesses, understandably. And you know, that's the kind of thing oftentimes we get involved with. People will contact us for help, you know, either planning in advance or, you know, kind of the sort of bad case scenario of everything is sort of falling apart and I really need to retire and what do I do? So we do a lot of helping companies kind of plan for the future. And with that, you know, that's one of those things that, you know, we always say you need a really long runway for. So that's not something where you can say, well, I'm thinking about retiring in the next 2 years. Let's see what, you know, Junior's up to and get him in the business. You know, obviously you want to, if you're serious about transitioning to the next generation, I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir. You need to make sure that person has had opportunities to get involved over the long term, that they're displaying the interest and the aptitude to do so. And so it's just not something that can happen kind of overnight. But that's the number one issue that we see with family-owned businesses is planning for the kind of succession and transition to the next generation. Or, yeah, God forbid if it doesn't work out, well, what's the transition plan if the next generation doesn't want to or isn't able to take over? Is it selling to a partner, doing an ESOP, key employees, whatever the transition planning might be?
We always talk about that for family businesses. There's often a much bantied about statistics that there's a 30, 13, and 3% chance that it goes from the first to the fourth generation. So we're like, we're just here to help you go along, do that. We have peer groups. We have other things that help family business. And we always do programs on succession planning because people don't realize a lot of time, 96% of businesses will say, yeah, an exit strategy is good, but only 13% have one. So we'll do a program. We'll say, raise your hands. How many of you have a succession plan? And a lot don't, so it's, I tease with Brooke, who works with me, if I get hit by a bus, somebody told me I should say if I win the lottery, but it's good to have, a succession. So what's next? And we try to help with that. And certainly the lawyers, we were talking to a previous guest who was talking about shareholder agreements and things like that. So when you do get into some of those tough decisions, if you've already laid the groundwork and put it in there, then you can go back to that agreement and say, no, this is what you agreed to, or easily pass it along.
I mean, exactly. I mean, succession planning, it kind of falls in the same category as, say, updating your will. It's like something you need to do, but it's kind of unpleasant to think about. And, you got all these immediate things on your desk. So oftentimes, we see people just kind of, yep, I'm going to get next year. I'm definitely going to get to that succession plan. And then, health issues can kick in, or, a need for kind of more liquid cash can kick in, whatever it might be. And then folks are trying to make those decisions, very weighty decisions on a very compressed timetable. So obviously, the longer you can give towards planning and actually coming up with a transition plan, a succession plan that makes sense, the better. And we certainly recommend, involving your accountant and your lawyer. Maybe you have a financial advisor, whoever it is, getting those folks in the room, talking it over with them. It's like eating your peas. It's not fun, but it's good for you. It's you'll sleep easier at night knowing that you got a plan for Junior or whoever else for that.
I love peas. So let me ask you a question, Stacy. Maine is famously a horrible place to do business. We
don't mince words there, Derek.
Well, no, it's the facts are the facts. Unfortunately, we're at the bottom of just about every list that shows up. So if Stacy Stitham became governor or king tomorrow, what would you change to make it easier to do business in the state of Maine for family businesses?
Well, first of all, I woke up and I was governor, I would have an immediate panic attack because what an unpleasant deal with that. But I think, you raise a sad reality, which is that if you're a business looking to cite your company, Maine is not necessarily your most appealing option. We've got a great workforce and things like that. But I would say I don't want to. I'll be politic here because this is my job. I won't call out any particular regulatory requirement or anything like that. But what I will say is I think I would seriously examine the effect to which our kind of volume and totality of employment business regulations is deterring business growth. So I don't think it's any one particular law or regulation that I would say we need to get rid of this. But I do think that we have a balancing act between very laudable aims and certainly the laws that we have on the books that are intended to protect employees and from exploitation, et cetera, all good. But I think there comes a tipping point where we simply have too large a volume of regulatory requirements, even with respect to other New England states. So I would say if I woke up tomorrow and I found myself governor, I would want to appoint maybe a commission with representatives from the business community and the legislature, whatever it might be, to look at sort of, okay, here's the total volume. And this is the effect it's having on business growth. Should there be some more small business exemptions? Should there be some requirements that we should simply ease up on? Whatever it might be, I think we do have an issue with just the total volume and how it's applying to the business community.
Oh, you have my vote.
Yep.
Two votes.
Yeah, I think
Right.
a lot of times people have this good intention, but they don't see down the line how it's really going to affect the business.
Yeah.
And so it's like, yeah, we need to make it better for people to be able to do business, because a lot of people, family businesses, stay in Maine because they have the legacy here, but they could go across the border or further south and they could do much better. You've talked about that in Maine Biz. So
Exactly.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think we also have a tendency to think all businesses are sort of the same size, and that's not the case. And especially for smaller family-owned businesses starting out, your traditional mom and pops, that's where I really think the issue can be very daunting, and folks are going to close their doors or, like you say, move next door to New Hampshire.
Right.
We are on Chit Chat with Derek and Kat, and we're talking to Stacy Stitham. She is with Brann Isaacson. Is it Brann or Brann?
Brann.
Brann and Isaacson. Want to make sure I get that right. And before we're going to hit you with some lightning round questions to kind of wrap up. So before we do that, though, tell our listeners how they can reach you, how they can get a hold of you, your website, social media, all that kind of stuff. Having a good lawyer is very important. My father always says that the 11th commandment is he with the best lawyer winneth.
Oh, I like your father already. So thank you, Derek and Kat. So I am most easily reached if you want to go to our website, It's brannlaw.com. That's BRANNLAW, all one word.com. Also our main line is 786-3566. Feel free to give me a call. But we hope you'll check us out. Our website has a lot of information about the different areas of practice we have. And as I mentioned, we are very focused on the business community. So there's a lot of different areas probably of direct relevance to whatever your needs are.
And do you serve the whole state?
We do. Yep.
Okay.
And you're also on the IFOB website. So people looking for attorneys and things are there.
And that website is
www.fambusiness.org.
Thank you.
They say don't say WW anymore, so maybe I'm showing my age. So lightning round.
Lightning round begins.
Okay. So what saying are you known for?
What saying am I known for? Well, and I'm not sure anything polite I should say, but I would say kind of look for the leaders. I say that a lot at work. So look for the leaders. No one can run a company or a business by themselves. Look for the other folks who are going to help you do that.
Nice.
All right. Tell us something that might not show up on your bio, but is very interesting about yourself.
Well, I would say that I did musical theater in high school. And I was a terrible singer and I was very shy, but I liked to act for some reason. So it was a good exercise in learning to move outside my comfort zone.
All right. And what plays did you do?
Fiddler on the Roof.
Okay.
Anything goes. What else? The Music Man and something else. It's been a while, so I forget.
Yeah. What high school was that?
I went to Foxcroft Academy in Dover, Foxcroft, Central Maine.
All right. Then this is before YouTube, so nobody can find those.
Yes, nobody should. Old VHS tapes is what you're going to end.
Yeah. All right. Well, if we'll try to dig one of those up and play those at the end of this episode.
Okay, so the other thing we're asking people is what books, podcasts, periodicals are you listening to? Are you doing for continuing learning?
Great question. So I love reading, but I have about zero time. So I've been doing a lot more podcasts these days. And I try to use it to sort of stay abreast with what's happening in current events, although it's like a fire hose of news these days. So I listen to a lot of Slate podcasts for kind of political stories and things like that. Try to get my news in easy to digest bites.
And our big question, the last one.
Go ahead.
Netflix. What are you watching on Netflix?
Any recommendations?
So I've actually been watching reruns of The Good Place. Well, I don't know if it's actually on Netflix or maybe it's one of the 4,000 other apps.
Right, yeah.
But if you haven't seen it, it's very funny. It's
A Good Place.
Never heard of it.
Yeah.
It's okay, so it's great. It's literally about these four people. Ted Danson's in it, and there's these four people who die, and they end up in what they think is the good place after they die, but may not be. I won't say too much about it. It's very funny. I definitely recommend it.
All right. I just watched a series with Ted Danson called Man on the Inside.
Oh, yeah.
He goes undercover at a nursing home.
Yep.
It was very cute.
Relatable. You can like kind of listen to Ted Danson talk all day.
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Chit Chat with Derek and Kat. If you loved hearing today's family business story, don't forget to follow the show and leave us a review. It helps more people find these amazing stories. You can listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Want to learn more about the families and service providers we feature or get involved with the Institute for Family-Owned Business or Vogue Packaging Corporation? Visit fambusiness.org, fambusiness.org. We'll see you next time on Chit Chat with Derek and Kat.